I now pronounce you husband and wife." The words should have filled me with joy. Instead, as I stood there in my sustainable silk wedding dress, facing the congregation of shocked faces, all I could think about was the envelope clutched in my trembling hands. The envelope that would destroy everything my parents had built their lives upon. "Actually," I said, cutting off the minister mid-sentence, "I have something to say." The chapel fell silent. Behind me, I could hear my mother's sharp intake of breath, could feel my father's rage building like a storm. But after 29 years of being invisible, of being pushed to the edges of every family photo, of watching my dreams be sacrificed for my brother's ambitions, I finally had their attention. And I wasn't going to waste it. How did I get here? How did Claire Mitchell, the dutiful daughter who never caused trouble, end up standing at her own wedding altar, about to detonate a bomb that would obliterate her family? The answer lies in a discovery I made just 3 weeks ago in a manila folder hidden in my father's desk drawer. Flashback 3 weeks earlier, the discovery. The wedding planning folder sat open on my kitchen table, its cream-colored pages scattered with venue confirmations, catering menus, and seating charts. I should have been excited. In 3 weeks, I would marry David Chen, the man who saw me for who I truly was, not who my parents wanted me to be. Instead, I felt hollow, like I was planning someone else's wedding. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, a successful architect who had designed award-winning sustainable buildings, yet I couldn't even design my own happiness. Every decision about my wedding had been a battle: the venue, the flowers, the menu. Mom wanted traditional everything, while I yearned for something that reflected who I actually was. "Claire, honey, have you finished the seating arrangements?" David called from the kitchen, his voice carrying that gentle concern I'd grown to love over our 2 years together. "Almost," I replied, my fingers drumming nervously on the table. Just trying to figure out where to put my parents. The photo album I'd been looking through lay open to a family portrait from Marcus's high school graduation. There he stood, front and center, his soccer trophy gleaming in the afternoon sun. My parents flanked him with proud smiles that seemed to radiate genuine joy, the kind of joy I'd rarely seen directed at me. I was relegated to the edge of the frame, barely visible, my own achievements invisible beside his athletic glory. I traced the outline of that photo with my finger, remembering how that same afternoon had marked the beginning of my financial nightmare. That was the day I discovered my college savings account had been drained. $50,000, gone without a trace or explanation. For Marcus's European training program, Dad had explained matter-of-factly when I'd confronted them, as if my money had always been his to spend. "It's an investment in his future." "What about my future?" I'd asked, my voice small and confused. "You'll figure something out, sweetheart. You're smart. Maybe you can get a job at the local elementary school while you save up for community college." Community college. Not the architecture program I dreamed of since I was 12, but community college. As if my dreams were worth less than Marcus's. David appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands on a dish towel. His lawyer's instincts were always sharp, and I could see him reading the tension in my shoulders, the way I held myself when old wounds were reopened. "You know," he said carefully, "we could just not invite them." I shook my head, feeling the familiar weight of family obligation. "No, they need to be there. They need to see everything." What I didn't tell him was that I wanted them there for a different reason entirely. I wanted witnesses. The doorbell interrupted my bitter thoughts. Maya Rodriguez, my best friend since college, stood on my doorstep with a bottle of wine and her signature concerned expression. Maya had been my roommate during those lean years when I'd worked 3 jobs to pay for architecture school, when I'd survived on ramen noodles and determination. She'd seen me at my lowest points and never once suggested I give up on my dreams. "Spill it," she said, settling onto my couch with the practiced ease of someone who'd been talking me through crises for over a decade. "Your text sounded urgent." I pulled out an envelope from my desk drawer, cream-colored, expensive paper with elegant gold lettering that spoke of old money and older secrets. "I received this yesterday from Aunt Victoria." Maya's eyes widened. "The infamous Aunt Victoria? The one your parents never talk about?" "The very same." I handed her the invitation, watching her face as she read the formal script. David sat down beside me, his lawyer's instincts immediately engaged. What kind of opportunity did she mention? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of suppressed anger pressing against my chest like a physical thing. Yesterday, I found something in Dad's old office files. A letter from 2015. The memory of that discovery still made my hands shake. I'd been helping Mom organize Dad's home office, a task I'd volunteered for, thinking it would be a bonding experience. Instead, it had become the moment my entire understanding of my family shifted. Deep flashback, the discovery moment. I can still remember the exact moment my world tilted off its axis. The afternoon sun had been streaming through Dad's office window, dust motes dancing in the golden light as I sorted through years of paperwork. Insurance policies, tax returns, old bank statements, the detritus of a middle-class life, carefully filed and organized. Then I found it tucked between a homeowner's insurance renewal and a warranty card for a lawnmower he'd bought in 2014. A letter addressed to me, dated 7 years ago, with the University of Pennsylvania letterhead embossed at the top. Congratulations, Miss Mitchell. We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected to receive a full academic scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania School of Architecture. This scholarship covers tuition, room and board, and includes a stipend for materials and living expenses. The total value of this award is $287,000 over 4 years. My hands had shaken as I read those words, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. A full ride. Everything paid for. The education I dreamed of since I was 12 years old, designing dollhouses and sketching buildings in my school notebooks, imagining a future where I could create spaces that made people's lives better. But there was more. Clipped to the back of the acceptance letter were my parents' notes, scrawled in my mother's careful handwriting. Robert, we discussed this. Architecture is no career for a woman. The hours are terrible, the travel requirements impossible for a future mother. We agreed Claire would be happier in education. File this away and don't mention it to her. Eleanor, and my father's response, written in his distinctive blue ink, agreed. Claire will thank us later when she has a stable job and can be home with her children. This is what's best for her. They had decided my future without me. They had stolen not just my money, but my choices, my opportunities, my dreams. And they had done it believing they knew what was best for me, never once asking what I wanted for myself. Present 3 weeks before wedding, a full scholarship to architecture school, I said, my voice steadied despite the rage building inside me like a slowly gathering storm. They never told me. They let me believe I had to take out loans because my college fund was empty. Maya nearly choked on her wine. Are you serious? Claire, that's beyond controlling. That's criminal, David finished, his lawyer's mind already working through the implications. Theft, fraud, possibly more depending on how they accessed your account. Dead serious. They hid it because they thought architecture was a man's profession. Wanted me to pursue teaching instead. I stood up, pacing to the window, needing movement to contain the energy coursing through me. Something safe and feminine and appropriate for a future mother. The city lights flickered in the distance, and somewhere out there was the life I should have had. The life where I graduated debt-free from an Ivy League architecture program, where I'd had the connections and opportunities that came with elite education, where I'd never had to choose between rent and textbooks. All those nights I worked double shifts at the cafe. I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. All those years of crushing student debt, ramen noodles for dinner, buying textbooks used and highlighted to death because I couldn't afford new ones. And I had a full ride waiting for me. I remembered those years with painful clarity. Working at the 24-hour diner near campus, coming home at 3 a.m. smelling like grease and exhaustion, only to be up at 6 a.m. for my morning classes. Falling asleep over my drafting table, waking up with ruler marks pressed into my cheek. Applying for every scholarship, every grant, every work-study program available, writing essay after essay about my dreams and my determination. Meanwhile, Marcus had been living in a luxury apartment near his training facility in Barcelona, posting Instagram photos of his meals at expensive restaurants, his weekends exploring Europe. All funded by money that should have been mine. David's jaw was tight with the controlled anger I'd seen him display in court when facing particularly egregious injustice. What did Victoria want to discuss? I picked up Aunt Victoria's invitation again, running my fingers over the embossed lettering. She was always different from the rest of the family. Built her own business, never married, lives life on her terms. They called her the black sheep, but maybe she was just the only one brave enough to break free. I had only vague memories of Victoria from my childhood, a tall woman with sharp eyes and expensive clothes who would sweep into family gatherings like a force of nature, making my parents visibly uncomfortable. She would ask me questions about school, about what I wanted to be when I grew up, actually listening to my answers in a way that made me feel important. Then, when I was about 14, she stopped coming to family events. When I asked why, Mom would get tight-lipped and Dad would mutter something about bad influences and women who think they're too good for family. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Don't forget Marcus's game is this Sunday. The whole family needs to be there to support him. Even now, I said, showing them the message, feeling the familiar sting of being an afterthought. I landed the Richardson project last week, the biggest sustainable design contract our firm has seen in 5 years, and when I told them, Mom just asked if I'd bought Marcus a wedding gift yet. The Richardson project had been my career breakthrough, a $2.3 million sustainable housing development that would serve as a model for environmentally conscious urban planning. I'd been working on the proposal for months, competing against firms with decades more experience. When I'd won the contract, I called my parents immediately, breathless with excitement and pride. That's nice, dear, Mom had said, her voice distracted. Speaking of gifts, have you thought about what you're getting Marcus for his wedding? Sarah's been dropping hints about a honeymoon in Tuscany. Marcus's wedding. My younger brother, who'd never held down a job for more than 6 months, was getting married to his college girlfriend, and somehow that was more important than my professional triumph. Flashback my childhood and dreams. I was 8 when I first told my parents I wanted to be an architect. We were driving past a construction site downtown, and I pressed my face to the car window, watching the steel beams rise against the sky like the skeleton of some magnificent creature. I want to build something like that, I'd said, my voice full of wonder. Dad had laughed, the sound fond but dismissive. That's nice, sweetheart. Maybe you can teach kids about buildings when you grow up. Mom had turned around in her seat, smiling indulgently. Teaching is such a noble profession for women, Claire. You'd be so good with children. You have such a nurturing nature. Even at 8, I'd known that wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want to teach about buildings. I wanted to create them. I wanted to design spaces that made people feel safe, happy, inspired. I wanted to solve problems with concrete and steel and glass. But I'd learned early to keep my dreams quiet, to sketch my building designs in private, to pretend that their vision for my life was enough. Every time I'd brought up architecture, they'd steer the conversation toward education, toward the stability and respectability of teaching. Architects work such long hours, Mom would say. How would you have time for a family? The construction industry is no place for a lady, Dad would add. All those rough men, all that dangerous equipment. You'd be much happier in a nice, safe classroom. So I'd learned to stop talking about my dreams. I'd learned to nod and smile when they talked about my future as Mrs. Someone's wife and mother, as a teacher who would have summers off to spend with her children. But I never stopped dreaming. I never stopped sketching buildings in the margins of my notebooks. Never stopped imagining the life I really wanted. Present 3 weeks before wed, David reached for my hand, his touch grounding me in the present moment. Whatever you're planning with Victoria tomorrow, I'm with you. Maya nodded in agreement, her dark eyes fierce with loyalty. Me too. It's time they realized what they've done. I walked to the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance like stars that had fallen to earth. I used to think if I worked hard enough, achieved enough, they'd finally see me. Really see me, not just their idea of who I should be. But now I understand, they never will. Not unless I make them. The invitation felt heavy in my hands, like it carried the weight of all my suppressed anger and hurt, all the years of being invisible in my own family. Tomorrow I would meet the aunt I'd been warned about my entire life, the woman who dared to challenge the family's suffocating traditions. My phone buzzed again, another text from Mom. Have you started looking into teaching positions yet? It's not too late to change careers, dear. Architecture is so unpredictable. Even now, 3 weeks before my wedding, she was still trying to reshape my life. She couldn't simply congratulate me on my success. She had to undermine it to suggest that I'd made the wrong choice, that it wasn't too late to become the woman she always wanted me to be. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank statements from 2015, the ones showing the sudden disappearance of my savings. Next to them, I placed the hidden scholarship letter and 7 years of financial records, all the proof of their betrayal, meticulously preserved. Maya, I said, turning to my best friend, remember when you said revenge is a dish best served cold? She nodded, a slow smile spreading across her face. You've been planning something, haven't you? I can see it in your eyes, that look you get when you're designing something complex. Well, I think it's time to take it out of the freezer. I picked up Victoria's invitation one more time. Tomorrow I start planning the wedding of their dreams, and their worst nightmare. David wrapped his arms around me from behind, his presence solid and reassuring. Are you sure about this? Once you start down this path, there's no going back. I leaned back into his embrace, watching our reflection in the window, two people on the verge of building a life together, a life that would be entirely our own. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. As if on cue, my phone lit up with one final text from Mom. Don't forget, family always comes first, Claire. Everything we've done has been for family. I smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who'd finally learned to play the game. Oh, Mom, I whispered. You have no idea how right you are. The meeting with Victoria next day. The Cafe Victoria chose surprised me, no pretentious wine bar or corporate conference room. Instead, it was a cozy corner spot called the Daily Grind, with mismatched furniture and the comforting smell of fresh coffee mingling with cinnamon and old books. The kind of place where artists and writers came to work, where conversations happened in low, intimate tones. I arrived 15 minutes early, my nerves jangling like discordant piano keys, but she was already there. Victoria Jackson sat at a corner table, perfectly composed, reading what looked like architectural plans while sipping coffee from a ceramic mug. You look just like your mother did at your age, Victoria said, standing to greet me, except for the eyes. You've got the Jackson fire in them. I studied her as we sat down, trying to reconcile this elegant woman with the family monster I'd been warned about for decades. Victoria wore a crisp blazer over dark jeans, her silver hair cut in a sharp bob that framed a face that was both authoritative and kind. She looked successful, confident, everything my parents had tried to convince me she wasn't. I have to admit, I said, accepting the coffee she'd ordered for me. I was surprised to get your invitation. I half expected my parents to intercept it. Victoria's laugh was rich and knowing. Oh, they tried. I had to send it to your office to make sure it reached you. My office? How did you? I've been following your work, Claire. The sustainable housing project on 4th Street, brilliant design. The way you integrated the solar collection system with the architectural aesthetics? Inspired. I nearly dropped my coffee. You know about that? I know about all of it. Your graduation with honors despite working 3 jobs. The Innovation Award from the Urban Planning Association last year. The way you've built a reputation in sustainable architecture while paying off crushing student debt. Her eyes narrowed, and I saw a flash of anger that had nothing to do with me. I also know about the scholarship. My heart stopped. How did you? Because I was on the selection committee. Victoria leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than shouting. I voted for your application. When the acceptance letter came back unopened with a note saying you decided to pursue a different path, I knew Eleanor and Robert had interfered. Flashback Victoria's perspective. Victoria had always been the rebel of the Jackson family. While her siblings pursued traditional paths, marriage, children, conventional careers, she built Jackson's sustainable architecture from nothing, starting with a $1,000 loan and an unshakable belief that buildings could be both beautiful and responsible. The family had never forgiven her for choosing success over their narrow definition of femininity. They'd whispered about her behind closed doors, calling her selfish, unnatural, a woman who'd forgotten her place. But Victoria had learned to wear their disapproval like armor. She'd watched from a distance as her brother Robert tried to mold his children into extensions of his own failed ambitions. She'd seen Marcus pushed into sports he didn't love, seen Claire's architectural dreams dismissed as unfeminine fantasies. But when Claire's scholarship application crossed her desk 7 years ago, Victoria had seen something that reminded her of her younger self: raw talent, genuine passion, and a hunger for something more than what her family offered. She'd been waiting for the right moment to make her move. The wedding provided the perfect opportunity. Present the CAF meeting. The waitress arrived with our food, a selection of pastries and sandwiches that Victoria had pre-ordered. She'd thought of everything, planned every detail. I was beginning to understand where I'd inherited my strategic thinking from. Why now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why reach out after all these years? Because I'm about to retire, and I need someone to take over my firm. Victoria took a sip of her coffee, her eyes never leaving mine. Someone with vision, talent, and a score to settle. I nearly choked on my sandwich. Your firm? You mean Jackson Sustainable Architecture? The irony wasn't lost on me. JSA was one of the leading sustainable architecture firms in the region, the company I'd been secretly admiring for years. I'd studied their projects, analyzed their designs, even applied for internships there during college, applications that had gone unanswered. The very same. Currently managing projects worth over $50 million. She pulled out another document from her leather portfolio. I'm offering you a partnership, immediate 50% stake, with full ownership transfer in 5 years. My mind raced, trying to process what she was saying. This was impossible. People didn't just hand over multi-million-dollar companies to relatives they barely knew. There had to be a catch. There's a catch, isn't there? Victoria's expression hardened, and for the first time, I saw the steel that had allowed her to build an empire in a male-dominated industry. The catch is that your parents will fight this with everything they have. They'll try to convince you it's too risky, that you're not ready. They'll probably even offer to help Marcus buy the firm instead. The idea of Marcus, who couldn't balance his own checkbook, running an architecture firm would have been laughable if it wasn't so perfectly in character for my parents' decision-making process. They can't stop me, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I'm not that invisible little girl anymore. No, you're not. Victoria pulled out one final document, sliding it across the table with the gravity of someone revealing a state secret. This is a detailed record of every penny they took from your account, with interest calculated to present day. The total comes to just over $887,000. I stared at the numbers, feeling sick. That amount would have covered my entire education with money left over for a down payment on a house, for starting my own firm, for building the life I'd always dreamed of. That would have changed everything, I whispered. Yes, it would have. Victoria's voice softened for the first time since I'd sat down. Claire, I'm not just offering you a business partnership. I'm offering you a chance to take back what's yours. An idea was forming in my mind, crystallizing like a building design that suddenly snapped into perfect focus. The wedding, I said slowly. They're expecting me to play the perfect daughter, to finally fall in line with their expectations. The prodigal daughter returning to the fold. Victoria's smile was sharp and knowing. Instead, they'll get a surprise they'll never forget. I want to make them feel what I felt, I continued, the words coming faster now as the plan took shape. The shock, the betrayal, the sudden realization that everything they thought they knew was wrong. Revenge is a dish best served in public, Victoria said, raising her coffee cup in a mock toast. Are you prepared for the consequences? They'll disown you. Probably me too, though that ship sailed years ago. I thought about all the family dinners where my achievements were ignored, all the times Mom pushed teaching applications my way, all the years of watching Marcus receive everything while I struggled for scraps. I thought about the scholarship letter, hidden away like a shameful secret, and the casual way they'd stolen my future without losing a moment's sleep. What about Marcus? I asked, surprised by the pang of guilt I felt. He's not the one who took my money. No, but he benefited from it. Victoria's eyes met mine, and I saw no softness there. Sometimes innocent people get caught in the crossfire. That's the price of revolution, Claire. Are you willing to pay it? I pulled out my phone, showing her the latest text from mom. Found some great elementary teaching positions, sending links now. Architecture is so unstable, dear. Time to think about your future family. Even now, hours after our meeting yesterday, she was still trying to reshape my life, still trying to convince me that my dreams were impractical, that I should settle for less than what I wanted. Let's do this, I said, my voice steady with newfound resolve. Victoria handed me a pen. Right now. But remember, once you sign these papers, there's no going back. Your parents will never forgive this betrayal. Betrayal? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Like hiding my scholarship? Like stealing my savings? Like crushing my dreams every chance they got. I signed the partnership agreement with steady hands, watching my signature appear next to Victoria's on the official documents. Each letter felt like an act of defiance, a rejection of everything they tried to make me believe about myself. Welcome to JSA, Victoria said, gathering the papers with practiced efficiency. Now, about your wedding. I assume you'll want to make it memorable. Oh, it will be. I pulled out my wedding planner, flipping through pages of carefully organized details. They're expecting the perfect daughter to have the perfect traditional wedding. Instead, they'll get served legal papers between the cake cutting and the first dance. You understand this will burn every bridge, Victoria warned, though her tone suggested she approved entirely. I thought about the photo album at home, about all those pictures where I was pushed to the edge, barely visible, my accomplishments overshadowed by Marcus's mediocrity. I thought about 29 years of being told I wasn't enough, wasn't right, wasn't what they wanted. Some bridges, I said, deserve to burn. As we prepared to leave the cafe, Victoria squeezed my shoulder. Get ready for war, Claire, because that's exactly what this is going to be. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen, truly understood, and I was ready for battle. 6 months of partnership, the building of Claire's empire. The months that followed my partnership with Victoria were a whirlwind of professional growth and personal discovery. Jackson's sustainable architecture became my second home, my sanctuary, the place where I could finally be myself without apology or explanation. And if we adjust the solar panels here, I pointed to the 3D model on my tablet, addressing the city planning committee. We can increase efficiency by 30% while maintaining the aesthetic appeal that the historical society requires. The Thompson Community Center project had become my obsession, a sustainable community hub that would serve 3 underserved neighborhoods while pioneering new green building techniques. It was the kind of project I dreamed about since childhood, the kind of work that made a difference in people's lives. Impressive work, Victoria said after the clients left our conference room. 6 months into our partnership, and she'd become more than a business partner. She was the mentor I never had, the family member who actually understood my ambitions. You've exceeded every expectation I had. I was about to respond when my phone buzzed. Mom again, with her daily reminder that my wedding was approaching and she still hadn't forgiven me for my unreasonable independence. Darling, we need to discuss the wedding menu. Your father insists on traditional choices, none of that vegetarian nonsense you're planning. Speaking of expectations, I muttered, showing Victoria the message. The wedding was now just 2 weeks away, and the pressure from my parents had intensified exponentially. 2 weeks until the wedding, Victoria reminded me, her voice carrying a hint of anticipation. Are the papers ready? I patted my desk drawer, feeling the substantial weight of the legal documents inside. All prepared. David's lawyer reviewed everything yesterday. The timeline is set, the serving papers are ready, and the financial documentation is airtight. The intercom buzzed, interrupting our conversation. Ms. Mitchell, your brother Marcus is here to see you. My heart stopped. I hadn't seen Marcus since announcing my engagement 6 months ago, hadn't spoken to him since discovering the true extent of our parents' financial manipulation. Victoria squeezed my shoulder before leaving the office, giving me privacy for what was sure to be a difficult conversation. Marcus walked in, looking uncomfortable in his coaching outfit, his eyes taking in the impressive space that had become my domain. Awards lined the walls. Architectural models displayed my various projects, and the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. Nice office, sis. Really nice, he said, his voice carrying a mixture of admiration and something else, guilt, maybe, or regret. What are you doing here, Marcus? I kept my voice professionally neutral, the way I'd learned to speak to difficult clients. He sat down across from my desk, fidgeting with his car keys in a gesture I remembered from our childhood. Mom and Dad don't know I'm here. They think I'm at a training session. Of course they do. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. What do you want? I saw the announcement in the business section. He leaned forward, his expression serious. You and Aunt Victoria. Sophia, do you know what you're doing? You mean succeeding? Building something meaningful? Creating a career that actually matters? I pulled up the Thompson project on my computer screen. Or are you worried I'm not teaching kindergarten like Mom wanted? That's not fair. Marcus's face flushed, and I saw the boy I'd grown up with, the one who'd always been caught between his parents' expectations and his own desires. I never asked them to favor me. No, you just accepted everything they gave you. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the bank statements I'd been carrying like talismans for months. My everything. He fell silent, staring at the awards displayed on my wall, at the evidence of the success I'd built despite our parents' sabotage. I didn't know about the scholarship, Claire. I swear on everything I hold dear, I didn't know. Something in his voice made me look at him more carefully. The cocky confidence he'd worn throughout our childhood was gone, replaced by something that looked like shame. But you knew about my savings. I spread the bank statements across my desk like evidence in a courtroom. You knew where your European training money came from. His voice cracked, and suddenly he looked much younger than his 26 years. I was 19. They said you agreed to it, that you wanted to help your little brother achieve his dreams. They said you were happy to contribute to the family's success. And you believed them? I stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the city I was helping to reshape. Did you ever once ask me? Marcus joined me at the window, and I could see his reflection struggling with something he'd been carrying for years. What are you planning, Claire? Mom's been crying about how you're pulling away, how you won't let her help with the wedding. She says you're breaking the family apart. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Help? You mean control? Did she tell you she tried to change my venue booking to her church? That she's been calling my caterer behind my back, trying to modify the menu? That she's invited 50 people I've never met because they're good family friends who need to see me return to the right path? She means well, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Stop defending them. I spun around, and my outburst surprised us both. Just once, Marcus, whose side are you really on? He stepped back, genuinely startled by my intensity. There shouldn't be sides in a family. There have always been sides. I was just too blind to see it before. I returned to my desk, pulling up the community center designs that had become my passion project. Look at this. Really look. This is who I am, what I was meant to do. Not teaching, not being the perfect daughter they wanted, but this. Creating something that matters, something that will outlast all of us. Marcus studied the designs, his expression gradually shifting from defensive to genuinely impressed. This is incredible, Claire. The environmental impact alone. But why Aunt Victoria? You know what that will do to Mom and Dad. Because she saw me, I said simply. Really saw me. When was the last time they actually saw either of us, Marcus? Not as extensions of their expectations, but as people with our own dreams, our own worth? He sank into the chair across from my desk, suddenly looking exhausted. The coaching job. It's not what I wanted. Never was. But they'd invested so much money, their reputation, their dreams for me. How could I disappoint them? For the first time in months, I felt a pang of sympathy for my brother. It's not too late to change paths, you know. You're only 26. You could still. He stood up, heading for the door before I could finish. Just, whatever you're planning for the wedding, be careful. They're already suspicious about your success here, about your relationship with Victoria. They're plotting something. Marcus, I called as he reached the door. When it happens, remember this conversation. Remember that I tried to include you, to protect you. He paused, his hand on the doorknob. When what happens? You'll see. I turned back to my computer, dismissing him with the kind of cold professionalism I'd learned from Victoria. Give Mom my love. Tell her the menu stays as planned. After he left, Victoria returned, reading my face with the skill of someone who'd navigated family politics for decades. Everything okay? I pulled out the legal documents from my drawer, spreading them across my desk like a general planning a battle campaign. He suspects something, but he won't warn them. He can't afford to. How can you be sure? Because for the first time, I saw my brother instead of their golden child. I added my final signature to the papers, each stroke of the pen feeling like a declaration of independence. He's as trapped as I was, just in a different cage. My phone buzzed again. A text from David. Wedding planner called. Your mom tried to change the flowers to traditional roses again. I smiled, typing back. Tell her the sustainable wildflower arrangements stay. Everything stays exactly as I planned it. 2 weeks until showtime. Victoria picked up the legal documents, checking each signature with the thoroughness that had made her empire possible. You know, there's still time to back out. We could find another way to make them understand, to make them pay for what they did. I looked around my office, my designs on the walls, my awards on display, my name on the door. Everything I'd achieved despite them, not because of them. The life I'd built with my own hands, my own talent, my own relentless determination. No, I said firmly, feeling the certainty settle into my bones like concrete setting. They chose their path 15 years ago when they decided to steal my future. Now I'm choosing mine. The sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows across my office. In 2 weeks, I would walk down the aisle, but not as the daughter they expected. I would walk as myself, finally, unapologetically myself, and they would never see it coming. 1 week before wedding, the final family dinner, Romano's was upscale but not ostentatious, the kind of place where serious conversations happened over excellent food. I'd chosen it deliberately, public enough to prevent a complete scene, elegant enough to match the gravity of what was about to unfold. Mom clutched her ever-present wedding planning folder like a shield, while Dad surveyed the restaurant with the calculating gaze of a man who measured every social interaction in terms of appearances and propriety. Claire, darling, Mom air kissed my cheek, leaving behind the faint scent of her signature perfume and barely contained anxiety. We have so much to discuss. The church called again about changing the venue to something more traditional. The venue is final, Mom. I signaled the waiter for wine, needing something to steady my nerves for what was coming. Everything is final. Dad settled into his chair with the authority of a man accustomed to being the head of the table, his eyes immediately finding David with that particular mixture of suspicion and grudging respect he reserved for men he couldn't quite control. Still time to reconsider that prenup, son, he said, his insurance salesman's smile not quite reaching his eyes. Family money needs protection, especially with all these new business ventures Claire's gotten herself involved in. What family money? I muttered under my breath, earning a sharp look from Mom that could have cut glass. David squeezed my hand under the table, his lawyer's composure serving as an anchor in the gathering storm. Actually, Robert, we've handled all the legal aspects already. Everything's been reviewed and finalized. Without consulting us. Mom's voice rose an octave, drawing glances from nearby tables. Claire, that's not how things are done in this family. Important decisions are made together, with input from people who love you. The waiter arrived with wine, providing a brief respite from the tension that was building like pressure in a sealed container. I watched Mom flip through her folder with mechanical precision, marking pages with colored sticky notes in a ritual that had frustrated me since childhood. Now, about the seating arrangement, she continued, her voice taking on that particular tone of forced cheerfulness that meant she was about to make a unilateral decision. I've moved your Aunt Victoria to the back corner table. We can't have her making a scene or drawing attention away from your special day. Victoria stays at the main table. I interrupted, my voice carrying the kind of firm authority I'd learned in boardrooms and client meetings. She's my business partner. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's knuckles turned white around his water glass, and I could practically see his blood pressure rising. Business partner? He leaned forward, his salesman's training temporarily abandoned in favor of genuine shock. What exactly does that mean, Claire? This was it. The moment I'd been planning for months. The conversation that would change everything between us forever. It means I'm now co-owner of Jackson's Sustainable Architecture. I met his gaze steadily, drawing strength from the anger I'd been nurturing like a carefully tended flame. I have been for 6 months. Mom's folders slipped from her hands, scattering papers across the floor like autumn leaves. Wedding vendor contracts, guest lists, menu options, all the careful planning she'd been doing for my life spread in chaos around her feet. That woman has poisoned your mind, she said, her voice shaking with genuine distress. First architecture, now this business nonsense. When will you stop fighting your natural path and accept what God intended for you? My natural path? I laughed, but there was no humor in it, only years of accumulated bitterness finally finding its voice. You mean like teaching? Staying home to raise children? Being a good little wife who never challenges her husband or dreams of anything beyond the domestic sphere? Claire, David warned softly, but I was beyond stopping. The words were pouring out of me like water from a broken dam. Did you know, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each revelation, that Marcus came to see me last week? He told me something very interesting about his coaching career. Leave your brother out of this, Dad snapped, his face flushing red. This is between us. Why? Because he might tell me how miserable he is. How he never wanted to be a coach in the first place. How you forced him into sports the same way you tried to force me into teaching. Mom's face went pale, her carefully applied makeup suddenly looking like a mask. That's not true. Marcus loves coaching. We invested everything in his career because he had talent, because he had a future in athletics. My everything, I corrected, my voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than shouting. My savings. My scholarship. My future. We did what was best for the family, Dad insisted, falling back on the justification he'd been using for decades. Someone had to have a reliable career, and Marcus showed real promise in athletics. David stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. I need some air. I followed him to the restaurant's terrace, leaving my parents to stew in the wreckage of their carefully constructed narrative. On the terrace, the calm before the storm. The night air was cool against my flushed cheeks, carrying the sounds of the city that sprawled beneath us like a constellation of possibilities. David pulled me close, his presence solid and reassuring in a world that suddenly felt unmoored. You okay? He asked, his lawyer's instincts reading the tension in my shoulders, the way I held myself when confronting difficult truths. They still don't see it, I said, pressing my face into his shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with the faint smell of the legal briefs he'd been reviewing earlier. They still think they did nothing wrong. In their minds, they were protecting me, guiding me toward a better life. Are you having second thoughts about the wedding plan? I pulled back, looking at the city lights that stretched endlessly before us, each one representing someone's dreams, someone's ambitions, someone's determination to build something meaningful. No, but I'm scared, David. What if this destroys not just my relationship with them, but Marcus too? What if it breaks everything beyond repair? Some things need to break to be rebuilt properly, he said, turning me to face him with gentle hands. Like those old buildings you renovate. Sometimes the foundation is too rotten to save, and you have to tear it down to build something honest. Through the restaurant window, I could see Mom frantically reorganizing her scattered papers, probably still trying to salvage some control over my wedding. Dad was on his phone, undoubtedly calling Marcus to demand explanations, to try to understand how his carefully ordered world had suddenly spiraled beyond his control. They're going to be blindsided, I whispered, feeling a mixture of anticipation and guilt that made my stomach churn. Good. David's voice was firm, carrying the kind of moral certainty that had first attracted me to him. Maybe that's exactly what they need. A shock so profound it forces them to examine their own behavior. Maya appeared at the terrace door, her face flushed with the effort of managing the chaos we'd left behind. Your mom's talking about changing the flowers again, she said, slightly out of breath. She's on the phone with the florist right now. Want me to run interference? I shook my head, feeling suddenly calm. Let her try. The florist has strict instructions to only take changes from me or David. She's about to learn that her authority over my life is more limited than she thinks. Smart girl, Maya grinned, her eyes sparkling with the kind of mischief that had gotten us through college together. Oh, and Victoria called while you were out here. The papers are ready for final delivery. Everything's set for the wedding. My stomach churned, but not with doubt, with anticipation. 1 week, I said, the words carrying the weight of inevitability. In 1 week, everything changes. Returning to the table, the final confrontation. We returned to find Mom in full crisis management mode, her phone pressed to her ear as she tried to undo decisions I'd made months ago. Dad sat in stony silence, his face set in the expression I remembered from childhood punishments, when he decided that disappointment was a more effective weapon than anger. Now, about your dress, darling, Mom said as she hung up her phone, her voice taking on that artificially bright tone that meant she was operating in full damage control mode. I've scheduled another fitting. The seamstress agrees that a more traditional silhouette would be more flattering, more appropriate for a church wedding. The dress is perfect as is. I cut her off, my voice carrying the kind of finality I'd learned from Victoria in business negotiations. Everything is exactly as I want it. But tradition, Mom began, isn't mine to follow, I finished. This is my wedding, my marriage, my life. The traditions I choose to honor are the ones that have meaning for me, not the ones that make you comfortable. I gathered my purse, feeling suddenly exhausted by the weight of pretense. David and I have an early meeting tomorrow. Thank you for dinner. Dad stood up, his insurance salesman's training finally kicking in as he tried one last attempt at control. Claire, wait. Whatever Victoria has promised you, whatever she's told you about the past, you need to understand that she's manipulating you. She's always been jealous of what we built, jealous of our family's success. I turned back, feeling oddly calm in the face of his desperation. No, Dad. That's what you and Mom did to me for 29 years. Victoria just showed me the truth. The truth. Mom scoffed, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. The truth is you're throwing away everything we've built for you, everything we've sacrificed to give you a good life. No, I said softly, my voice carrying more authority than I'd ever felt before. I'm building something of my own for the first time in my life. As we left the restaurant, I could hear Mom already back on her phone, probably calling the church again, still trying to reshape my wedding into her vision of what it should be. Some habits, I realized, die hard. 1 week, David said as we drove home through streets that sparkled with possibility. 1 week, I agreed, touching the legal documents in my purse. Then they'll finally understand what it feels like to have everything taken away. The city lights blurred past us, and I thought about foundations, the ones my parents had built on lies and control, and the new ones I was creating based on truth and choice. Some things really do need to break before they can be rebuilt, and I was ready to swing the wrecking ball. 3 days before wedding, final legal preparations. Are you absolutely certain about this? The lawyer, James Morrison, slid the final set of documents across his mahogany desk. His office overlooked the financial district, and through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the buildings I'd helped design dotting the skyline like monuments to persistence and vision. 3 days until the wedding, and my hands shook as I signed the last page of what would essentially be a declaration of war against my own family. I'm sure, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I handed him the special envelope, cream-colored paper that matched my wedding invitations, elegant calligraphy that would make the contents even more shocking by contrast. This needs to be delivered exactly as we discussed. During the ceremony, right after I say, I do, Morrison nodded, his gray hair and careful demeanor giving him the gravitas of someone who'd handled family legal battles for 3 decades. Miss Jackson has arranged for security personnel, discreet but effective, just in case emotions run high. My phone buzzed. Marcus calling. I'd been avoiding him since his office visit, but something in my gut told me to answer. Claire, we need to talk. His voice was urgent, carrying an undertone of panic I'd never heard before. Mom's planning something for the wedding. Something big. I stepped out of the lawyer's office into the marble-floored hallway, my heels echoing in the space like a countdown. What do you mean? She's been making calls for days, talking about saving you from yourself. I overheard her telling Dad that she won't let you ruin your life the way Victoria ruined hers. She said, and I quote, "If Claire won't listen to reason, we'll have to make her listen." My stomach dropped like a stone. Did you hear anything specific? No, but Claire, he paused, and I could hear him struggling with something. Whatever you're planning, they're ready for it. Or at least they think they are. Mom's invited half the church congregation to your wedding. She's building an army of witnesses to watch your return to righteousness. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. Of course she was. Mom had always been strategic in her manipulations, always careful to have public opinion on her side. Thanks for the warning, I said, meaning it. Are you ever going to tell me what's really going on? You'll find out at the wedding. I paused, thinking about the boy who'd been my playmate before he became their golden child. Just remember what we talked about in my office. Remember that you have choices too. After hanging up, I called Victoria immediately. She answered on the first ring. They're plotting something, I said without preamble. Of course they are. Victoria sounded unsurprised, her voice carrying the weary wisdom of someone who'd been battling family expectations for decades. Eleanor never could handle losing control. She's probably orchestrating some kind of intervention disguised as your wedding day. What do we do? We adjust our strategy. Come to the office now. Victoria's office, strategic planning. 30 minutes later, I sat in Victoria's corner office while she paced behind her desk, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor in a rhythm that matched my accelerated heartbeat. The late afternoon sun streamed through windows that offered a panoramic view of the city we were helping to reshape, one sustainable building at a time. We need to move everything up, she said, stopping mid-pace to fix me with the kind of intense stare that had intimidated city planners and corporate executives for decades. The documents need to be delivered during the ceremony itself, not afterward. During the ceremony? I stared at her, my mind racing through the implications. That's so public, so dramatic. Perfect. Victoria stopped pacing, her silver hair catching the afternoon light. They're expecting something at the reception. They'll be prepared, composed, ready to counter whatever we do with their own narrative about ungrateful daughters and family sacrifice. But during the actual ceremony, the door burst open and Maya rushed in, out of breath and clutching her phone like a weapon. You need to see this, she said, thrusting the device at me. It was a social media post from Mom, published just an hour ago. So blessed to be planning my daughter's perfect traditional wedding. After years of confusion and misguided independence, Claire is finally ready to embrace the path God intended for her. Can't wait to welcome her back to family values and feminine grace. Prodigal daughter family first, traditional values have God's will back to the path, I said, scrolling through the dozens of comments from family, friends, and church members, all congratulating my mother on my supposed transformation. She's making it sound like I'm some lost soul being saved from secular corruption. Classic Eleanor, Victoria muttered, her voice dripping with decades of accumulated frustration. She's setting the narrative before you can control it. When you make your move, she'll play the heartbroken mother trying to save her misguided daughter from the clutches of the evil feminist aunt. Maya sat down beside me, her face flushed with outrage. There's more. She's invited every conservative family friend she knows. I checked with the venue. The guest list has grown by 30 people since last week. She's building an audience. I realized, the full scope of her strategy becoming clear. Stacking the deck with people who will automatically take her side, who will see me as the ungrateful daughter rebelling against godly wisdom. Victoria pulled out her phone with military precision. Time to fight fire with fire. I'm calling Morrison. The documents will be delivered right after you say, I do, maximum impact, minimum time for them to recover and spin the narrative. Won't that completely ruin the ceremony? Maya asked, though her tone suggested she was more excited than concerned about the prospect. I laughed, but it was bitter sound that surprised even me. The ceremony? You mean the traditional spectacle they've turned my wedding into without my consent? Let it burn. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mom. Darling, I've invited Reverend Patterson to dinner tonight. He has some concerns about your modern ceremony choices and wants to discuss returning to biblical principles of marriage. Please be there at 7. We only want what's best for you. What's best for me? I showed them the message, feeling the familiar surge of anger that had become my constant companion. They've had 29 years to show me what's best for me. Now it's my turn. Victoria nodded approvingly, her eyes gleaming with the kind of strategic satisfaction I'd seen when she closed particularly challenging business deals. The student becomes the master. I'm not going to dinner, I decided, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Let them sit there with their reverend and plot their little intervention. They have no idea what's coming. Maya hugged me, her embrace fierce with loyalty and anticipation. Want me to come over tonight? We can do final dress alterations, drink wine, and prepare for battle. Actually, I said, an idea crystallizing in my mind. I need to write something. The legal documents are one thing, but they need to hear the truth from me. All of it. Victoria sat down across from me, her expression approving. A letter? Your own narrative to counter theirs? I pulled out my laptop, feeling the familiar calm that came over me when I was designing something complex and beautiful. Every scholarship they hid, every dream they crushed, every dollar they stole. They want to talk about paths? Fine. Let's talk about the path they forced me down and the one I chose for myself. For the next 3 hours, I wrote while Victoria and Maya handled phone calls, finalizing our new timeline and coordinating with Morrison. The words flowed easily, years of suppressed truth finally finding their voice. I wrote about the photo albums where I was always pushed to the edges, about the college fund that disappeared without explanation, about the scholarship letter hidden like a shameful secret. I wrote about working 3 jobs to pay for an education that should have been free, about falling asleep over textbooks I'd bought used and highlighted to death, about the dreams I'd been told were inappropriate for someone of my gender. I wrote about the slow realization that their love was conditional, dependent on my willingness to become someone I wasn't. As the sun set over the city, I printed 3 copies of my letter, one for Mom, one for Dad, and one to be read aloud at the ceremony for everyone to hear. So, Victoria said softly, reading over my shoulder, this will destroy them. No, I corrected, sealing the envelopes with the same care I use for architectural plans. They destroyed themselves the moment they decided their daughter was a possession to be controlled rather than a person to be loved. My phone lit up with one final message from Mom. Where are you? Reverend Patterson is waiting. Please don't embarrass us again. I turned off my phone and stood up, gathering my things with the ceremonial precision of someone preparing for battle. 3 days until the wedding. 3 days until the truth exploded in their faces like a carefully planned demolition. Let them wait, I said, feeling more powerful than I ever had in my life. They've made me wait my entire life. Wedding day morning, the final preparations. You look stunning, Maya whispered, adjusting my veil with the careful precision of someone who understood that this moment was about more than just looking beautiful. The sustainable silk draped perfectly over my form-fitting dress. The modern cut a deliberate rejection of the traditional gown Mom had tried to force on me. The bridal suite at the venue buzzed with controlled energy. Through the window, I could see guests arriving, Mom's reinforcements mixing with my actual friends and colleagues, David's family, and the small number of relatives who'd chosen to support me despite the family drama that had been brewing for months. Through the chapel door, I could hear Mom's voice carrying above the others, playing her role as the proud mother of the bride with Oscar-worthy performance. She was greeting guests, accepting congratulations on my supposed transformation, setting the stage for what she believed would be my public surrender to traditional values. Places, everyone. The wedding coordinator clapped her hands, her cheerful efficiency a stark contrast to the tension that filled the room like electricity before a storm. 5 minutes until showtime. Victoria appeared in the doorway, resplendent in her role as my maid of honor, wearing a deep blue dress that perfectly complemented her silver hair and fierce expression. The lawyer's in position, she reported quietly. Your parents have no idea he's here. Morrison is posing as a photographer's assistant. He'll move into position right after the vows. My hands trembled as I smoothed my dress, the fabric feeling like armor against what was coming. Did you see their faces when you walked in as my maid of honor? Victoria's smirk was sharp enough to cut glass. Eleanor nearly fainted right there in the front pew. Robert still trying to convince people I crashed the wedding uninvited. Maya peeked through the door that led to the chapel, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Full house. Your mom really did invite every conservative family friend in the state. The right side of the chapel looks like a meeting of the church board. Perfect. I took a deep breath, feeling the calm that came over me before major presentations or difficult client meetings. The bigger the audience, the better the impact. The music started, not the traditional wedding march mom had insisted on, but the modern string quartet arrangement I'd chosen months ago. Each note was a small act of rebellion, a reminder that this was my day, my choice, my moment. Dad appeared at the door, dressed in his best suit but wearing an expression of barely concealed disapproval. He'd spent the morning trying to talk me out of what he called my stubborn independence, making one last attempt to convince me to return to the fold. Last chance, he muttered as he took my arm, his grip a little too tight to be entirely paternal. We can still stop this nonsense, Claire. You don't have to destroy our family to make a point. You're right, Dad, I said, patting his hand with false sweetness. The nonsense stops today. The wedding ceremony, the moment of truth. The chapel doors opened, and the congregation rose as one, their faces turning toward me with expressions that ranged from genuine joy to barely concealed disapproval. At the altar, David waited with a smile that was both genuine and slightly nervous. He knew what was coming, but even he didn't know the full extent of what I'd planned. Mom sat in the front row, beaming with artificial pride, her wedding planning folder clutched in her lap even now. She'd spent months orchestrating this moment, convinced that my marriage would mark the end of my rebellious phase and the beginning of my transformation into the daughter she'd always wanted. Marcus sat beside her, looking uncomfortable in his dress uniform, his eyes meeting mine with an expression I couldn't quite read. Guilt, maybe. Or anticipation. Or fear. As Dad and I walked down the aisle, I caught snippets of whispered conversations from Mom's reinforcements. Such a beautiful traditional ceremony after all. Eleanor must be so relieved to see Claire finally settling down. Perhaps marriage will cure her of this architecture nonsense. Each comment fueled the fire that had been building in me for months. They saw my wedding as my surrender, my admission that they'd been right all along about what I needed, what I was capable of, what I deserved. Dad handed me off to David with a stiff nod that carried decades of masculine ritual, the transfer of responsibility from one man to another. But I wasn't being transferred. I was choosing my own path, finally and irrevocably. The minister began his speech about love and commitment, but I barely heard him. I was watching Morrison slip quietly into position near the front pew, the legal documents concealed in what looked like a photographer's equipment bag. Marriage is a sacred institution, the minister was saying, ordained by God to bring together two people in holy union to create a partnership that honors traditional values and builds strong families. The irony wasn't lost on me. In a few minutes, I would honor my commitment to David while simultaneously destroying every traditional expectation my family had for our marriage. If anyone has any reason why these two should not be joined in matrimony, the minister continued, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. Mom shifted in her seat, and I saw her hand twitch toward her folder. For a moment, I wondered if she would actually stand up, if she would try to stop my wedding in front of everyone. This was her last chance to save me from myself, her final opportunity to prevent what she saw as my ruin. The silence stretched for one heartbeat, two, three. Mom's hand stilled. She'd made her choice to fight me through social pressure and family manipulation rather than direct confrontation. Then, by the power vested in me by the state of Pennsylvania and Almighty God, the minister said, let us proceed with the vows. David and I exchanged the words we'd written together, promises that had nothing to do with traditional gender roles and everything to do with mutual respect, shared dreams, and the kind of partnership that enhanced rather than diminished both people involved. Do you, David Chen, take Claire Mitchell to be your lawfully wedded wife, to love and support her ambitions, to stand beside her as an equal partner in whatever life brings? I do, David said, his voice clear and strong. Do you, Claire Mitchell, take David Chen to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and respect his dreams, to build with him a life based on truth and mutual support? This was it. The moment everything changed. I do, I said, my voice carrying through the chapel with absolute certainty. Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband, and actually, I said, cutting off the minister before he could conclude, I have something to say. The chapel fell into stunned silence. Mom's face froze in her camera-ready smile, her expression shifting from pride to confusion to dawning horror as she realized her perfect moment was about to be hijacked. Dad started to stand, but stopped when Victoria moved closer to me, her presence both supportive and intimidating. Many of you are here today because my mother told you I was returning to the traditional path. I began unfolding the letter I'd spent hours writing. She told you I was being saved from my modern ideas, that I was finally ready to embrace the role God intended for me. Morrison stepped forward, pulling the legal documents from his bag. Mom's smile cracked like a facade finally crumbling under pressure. She's right about one thing, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. Today is about salvation. My own. Claire, Mom warned, her voice sharp with panic. Don't you dare make a scene at your own wedding. When I was 18, I continued, ignoring her completely. My parents stole my college fund to finance my brother's sports career. $50,000, taken without my knowledge or consent. Gasps rippled through the congregation like a wave. The conservative family friends Mom had invited as witnesses to my transformation were getting a very different show than they'd expected. But that wasn't all, I said, nodding to Morrison, who began moving through the pews, distributing copies of the documents I'd prepared. They also hid my full scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania School of Architecture, a scholarship worth nearly $300,000. Marcus looked at the floor, his shoulders hunched with shame. Several guests were now opening their envelopes, their faces showing shock as they read the detailed financial records Victoria had compiled. Today, I'm not just marrying the love of my life, I continued, feeling a sense of power I'd never experienced before. I'm also reclaiming what was stolen from me and announcing my partnership in Jackson's Sustainable Architecture, the firm my parents always warned me about. Mom ripped open her envelope, her face draining of color as she read the legal demand for repayment. This is a lawsuit. You're suing your own parents. Every dollar you took, I said calmly, with interest calculated to present day, plus damages for the opportunities you stole from me. You ungrateful, Dad started to shout, but Marcus grabbed his arm. That's not all. I turned to Victoria, who stepped forward with another set of documents. I'm also formally demanding an accounting of how my money was actually spent. Victoria's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Because it wasn't all spent on Marcus's training, was it, Robert? Some of it went to cover your gambling debts, your bad investments, your failed business ventures. The congregation erupted in shocked murmurs. This was better than any soap opera, more dramatic than any family drama they'd ever witnessed. Mom stood up, her perfectly composed facade finally cracking completely. You planned this. You turned our daughter against us. You poisoned her mind with your feminist nonsense. No, Mom. I stepped down from the altar, feeling more powerful than I ever had in my life. You did that yourself. Every time you dismissed my dreams, every time you chose Marcus over me, every time you tried to force me into your perfect little box. Security, Victoria called softly, and two discreet men appeared at the ends of the aisle. You're making a scene, Dad growled, trying to approach me, his face purple with rage and humiliation. No, David said, stepping between us with the calm authority of someone accustomed to courtroom confrontations. You made this scene for 29 years. Now you get to watch your daughter choose her own path. I turned back to the minister, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Please continue with the ceremony. Claire, please. Mom's voice cracked, all her careful composure finally abandoning her. We can fix this. We can work this out as a family. No, Mom, I said, facing David again with a smile that felt like sunrise after the longest night of my life. You can't fix this, but you can pay for it. The minister, looking slightly shell-shocked but determined to do his job, cleared his throat. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. As he spoke those final words, I heard Mom collapse into her seat, sobbing with the kind of theatrical despair she'd perfected over decades of emotional manipulation. Dad was still staring at the legal documents, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, and something that might have been fear. But for the first time in my life, their reactions didn't matter. I kissed David as the string quartet played our chosen song, and in that moment, I was finally completely free. The war was over, and I had won.